Ever since the world was born out of chaos, the Great Dome was in charge of all the laws of heaven and earth. And so, he changed everything that existed beneath the celestial dome, and the world went through two great cycles. During the first cycle, thousands of people trained to reach the realm beyond the celestial. Many cultivators dedicated themselves to their journey of power, meditating to become even stronger. However, living beings were greedy, and they didn't just steal the spiritual roots of heaven and earth. Because of this, the celestial Tao was weakened, and disappointed with the world, it decided to act. So, the entity wiped out every living being and the world was destroyed for the first time. During the second great cycle, the three worlds were divided into different realms, and they were never the same. One of these was the celestial realm, where the most powerful entities in the entire universe resided. There was also the human realm, a place where the weakest get caught in the cycle of reincarnation. And finally, there was the Earth realm, which was just a lost and completely devastated land. The West, on the other hand, was controlled by the gods who governed their territory with pride. Meanwhile, the East was managed by the immortals, who had their own rules and traditions. The Earth realm became deprived and quickly transformed into a lifeless land. The human realm sits between heaven and earth, where the weak enter the cycle of reincarnation. However, some beings from the first cycle weren't annihilated and were instead reincarnated as humans. Others simply came back to life, and some were even reborn with their powers completely intact. All of them share the same purpose, to embark on the path of destiny and challenge the celestial Tao. Because of this, the entity awoke enraged and unleashed a powerful thunderbolt upon the earth. For the second time, the world was destroyed, and now it's entering its third cycle. Suddenly, the voice stops speaking, and the young man tells it to shut up, saying he already understands everything that happened. He then asks if the previous celestial dome fled, and if he's the new replacement for the position. After receiving confirmation, the young man stomps his foot firmly on the ground with a smile on his face. At that moment, a great energy emanates from the young man's body, and he looks incredibly confident. With a smug grin, he says that he barely arrived and has already landed a super important position. Meanwhile, a few travelers were walking along a dangerous path in the mountains. Suddenly, one of them notices something strange and gets a surprised look on his face. The man sees the new dome talking to a small floating being and is completely confused. The young man explains that force doesn't solve problems, it only eliminates enemies. He says he won't make the same mistake as the old dome because he is much smarter. At this, the traveler wonders if that guy is talking to himself, since he can't see the spirit. Suddenly, the man feels a shiver run down his spine when he hears a noise. The guy looks back and doesn't understand anything that's happening around him. Then, a massive dragon appears, flying in their direction, and everyone starts to run. The monstrous creature opens its mouth, showing its sharp teeth, ready to attack. The travelers scream that it's a 4th level dragon, but our hero remains standing still. The young man then starts listing the power ranks and concludes that this monster is pretty weak. The giant beast approaches the young man, preparing to devour him in a single bite. But the protagonist just lifts his finger and concentrates a small amount of energy. Then, he fires a gigantic beam of light that completely disintegrates the dragon. The attack goes right through the monster's mouth with impressive force, hitting it head-on. The energy continues onward, causing a gigantic explosion that destroys an entire mountain. The dragon is in shock and starts to break out in a cold sweat, looking at the damage the young man caused. The beast then notices the hero's deadly gaze and becomes completely terrified of his power. With that, the monster flees, and the young man comments that this dragon was actually very brave. The spirit questions him about the use of force, but he says he just gave the dragon a little scare. The little creature asks if he won't use force against his adversaries. The new dome says the world won't be destroyed as long as negotiations are possible. Besides, he just arrived in this world and doesn't know how to be a good celestial dome. So, he decides that his first stop will be that city, right up ahead. Then, the hero approaches the gates of Liberty City, ready to explore. Right at the entrance, he sees a strange cart that is actually a cage full of people. Inside the cage, a few girls are trapped, looking very sad and tired. The men pulling the cart comment that the hunt was good and that they're going to make a lot of profit. One of them mentions that fairies are highly sought after by the nobles of that city. The protagonist approaches the cart with a serious expression on his face. The driver notices the young man and asks if he wants to buy any of his slaves. The seller then offers any one of them for just 10 gold coins, a smile on his face. He brags that he has prisoners of war and even innocent women from villages. The hero observes the girls through the bars with a cold and calculating gaze. Our hero's eyes gleam as he carefully analyzes the situation. With his special vision, he notices that the girls' hearts are lifeless. The merchant notices his lack of interest and offers an even rarer product. The man then leads him to another part of the area, showing him the way. There they find a cage covered by a large and mysterious black cloth. Then, the seller pulls the cloth with a smile on his face, revealing the surprise. Upon seeing what's inside the cage, the young man's eyes show a hint of surprise. Inside the cage, there's a very beautiful girl with the pointy ears of an elf. The girl is injured and kneeling on the ground in a very bad situation. She's an elf from the Western continent, and the seller offers her for 1,000 gold coins. The new celestial dome just stares at the scene without saying a single word. Suddenly, he turns around and starts to walk away, leaving the man behind. The seller gets angry, spits on the ground, and calls him a poor peasant. Our hero thinks that human trafficking is even worse than a feudal society. The spirit questions why he doesn't just free all the slaves right away. He replies that freeing them doesn't solve the problem, as others would just be captured. The young man then points to a place and asks the little creature to pay attention. There are hundreds of slave shops, just like that one, all over the continent. The being insists that as the celestial dome, he could end it all in an instant. But the young man questions if another group wouldn't just rise up to continue the same business. Unlike his predecessor, he says that to solve the problem, you need to go to the root of it. As soon as he enters the shop, an employee greets him with a smile and a lot of excitement. The seller asks what the customer needs and makes himself available to help. He then shows some well-trained slaves who are guaranteed products of the shop. The man guarantees that if any of them escape, he will pay the buyer 10 times their value. The hero questions if they wouldn't escape, even if he just let them go. So, he asks to pose a few questions to the girl, and the employee agrees immediately. The protagonist approaches the glass cell, and the slave stares at him with an empty gaze. He gets straight to the point and asks if the young woman present desires her freedom. To the young man's surprise, the girl just shakes her head negatively, without speaking. The young man doesn't give up, and now asks if she happens to have a boyfriend. The slave is surprised by the question, and her eyes suddenly widen. He takes a step forward, getting even closer to the glass that separates them. The hero insists and asks if she wants to be free or continue being a slave. The girl replies with her head down that she only wishes to be her master's slave. Our protagonist is shocked by the answer and lets out a sigh of frustration. And so, he asks the seller to take him to the establishment's VIP room. There, the employee serves a cup of tea to the new client with great courtesy. The young man sits down, and the man tells him to enjoy the drink and the snacks. Then, the seller says goodbye, mentioning he's going to fetch the exclusive items from the room. The young man wishes the seller's business good luck with a calm smile on his face. As soon as the door closes, our hero is left alone in the shop's VIP room. With a serious expression on his face, he orders the system to open up immediately. In a digital space, he decides that his first task as Dome will be to abolish slavery. The system's interface then appears and asks him to describe the new rule he wants to add. The rule applies to beings of the 5th level or lower, and any act of trafficking will activate it. Whoever commits this crime will see a shadowy figure with a power far superior to their own. Before attacking the trafficker, the shadowy entity will give them a warning to stop. The system then questions why the rule only applies up to the 5th level. The young man says that immortals wouldn't do such a thing, as it would be too shameful for them. He then goes back to typing on the holographic keyboard to finalize the details of the rule. If the warning fails, the figure will attack until the trafficker either dies or gives up the act. Now the system asks for a definition of human trafficking, and the hero starts typing. He defines it as forcing others to become merchandise, but if it's voluntary, it doesn't apply. The interface asks if the young man wishes to implement the new rule in the world now. Without hesitation, the new celestial dome presses the button to confirm his decision. At that moment, a wave of energy spreads throughout the entire world, activating the new law. Meanwhile, the shop employee was taking 2 new slaves to a client. Suddenly, a bright light shines, and they are all hit by the energy of the new rule. A great wave of power covers the entire city, changing the destiny of those people. The system announces that the rule is in operation, and our hero smiles, satisfied. Back in the room, the young man hears a noise, and the spirit appears by his side. At that moment, the VIP room door opens slowly, and the seller returns. The employee says he brought the 10 best products from the store for him to choose from. The young man observes the slaves with a sharp gaze, attentive to every detail. The girls remain silent with empty expressions, showing no emotion. The seller then says the price is high, but that he'll make a special discount. As the man speaks, a dark and frightening figure appears behind him. The employee feels a chill and turns around with a confused expression on his face. The shadow entity stares at him with glowing eyes and a malicious smile. Upon seeing the creature, the seller screams, desperate and terrified by the scene. Everyone panics, and the shadow monster attacks the man without hesitation. The employee crawls away and asks if the protagonist can see that thing. The hero remains seated calmly with a slight smile on his face. He says yes and asks if this is how the shop usually treats its customers. The man screams in terror that of course it isn't and falls into complete despair. Our protagonist thinks to himself that the new rule he created has already started working. With all the calm in the world, the young man picks up his cup to take a sip of tea. The seller tells him not to get any closer because that thing is very dangerous. But the young man points at him and says that if he weren't there, the danger would be something else entirely. The employee is confused and the young man points to the wall, which begins to crack. Suddenly, the wall explodes and a man is thrown into the room, all injured. The seller is in shock, not understanding what just happened right in front of him. Calmly, our hero catches the man who fell and carefully places him on the ground. The newcomer is badly injured and has an expression of intense pain on his face. The employee then recognizes the man and shouts that it's Captain Andre. The protagonist then asks who that guy is while calmly sipping his tea. The seller explains that he's a powerful warrior and wonders who could have defeated him. The captain stares at the hero and seems surprised by his presence in that place. From the hole in the wall, a shadowy figure emerges, and Andre says it's a stronger version of himself. The shadow creature then takes a step out and reveals its true form. It's a shadow clone of the captain himself, who appears to be much more powerful than the original. Andre asks if the employee also encountered the same situation as him. The captain warns the customer not to leave, as he cannot guarantee his safety. But the hero says that there's no one in this world capable of finishing him off yet. Andre gets annoyed and tells the young man to fend for himself as he prepares to fight. The shadow clone also prepares for combat, wielding its sword of shadows. Then, the two charge at each other at high speed for a direct confrontation. Their swords clash with force, creating sparks all over the room from so much power. The captain yells with all his might as he tries to overcome his shadowy opponent. The intense battle between the two warriors continues, destroying the entire room. One of the attacks destroys a vase, and the girls scream in fear at the commotion. Our hero then places his teacup on the table with great tranquility. He points to the side, asking them to take their fight somewhere else. The captain's sword starts to crack, and he can't withstand the clone's strength. The shadow creature dodges and hits Andre with a beam from its eyes. The shadow monster's blade is shown up close, revealing its power. With a powerful blow, the clone defeats the captain, who falls to the ground, injured. Before he hits the ground, the protagonist catches him, and the man coughs, spitting out a liquid. The warrior is out of breath and seems completely exhausted after the fight. The shadow entity stares at him with a cold and victorious gaze. Andre then shouts for the young man not to approach the creature. The captain covers his face with his hands, desperate with fear. Suddenly, he notices something and looks up with a confused expression. The creature turns its back on him and starts walking in another direction. The shadow clone walks towards the girls who are in the corner of the room. He then raises his sword and prepares to attack the slaves. The monster's blade glows with a terrifying and very powerful energy. The girls scream in panic, thinking this would be their end. But the clone strikes the chains, freeing all of them from slavery. The shadow creature attacks with its sword and breaks all the girls' chains. The blow passes close to one of the girls' faces and shatters the chains on her wrists. The purple-haired girl looks at her freed hands, unable to believe what just happened. At this, the captain and the employee wonder what is happening there. Our hero then breaks into a smile and says he finally understands everything. He explains that the shadows only want to free the slaves, not hurt anyone. The protagonist then tells the captain to stop the monsters with a sarcastic tone. A mischievous smile appears on the young man's face as he seems to be enjoying the situation. Suddenly, the shop owner appears, yelling not to let the slaves escape. The man is furious to see all his products escaping and the shop destroyed. He then yells for his men to work harder, and his own shadow clone appears. Upon seeing the creature, the owner is terrified and starts to break into a cold sweat. The shadow clone doesn't waste any time and lands a powerful punch on the man's face. With the impact, the shop owner falls to the ground, and the elf fairy watches him from above. The elf girl looks at the defeated man on the ground with a surprised expression. After her revenge, the little fairy flies away, leaving a trail of magic behind. The owner laments that his money is flying away as the elf escapes. Our hero steps on the head of the man who is on the ground, passed out and foaming at the mouth. Outside, the elf flies freely, the wind blowing through her blonde hair. The fairy then becomes giant and observes the protagonist in the midst of the destruction. The young man smiles and tells the giant fairy to go back home. With tears of happiness, the elf agrees to his request. Then he watches the girl disappear into the sky, turning into a bright star. Surprised, the protagonist turns his head and comments that it was pretty fast. At that moment, an intense light appears out of nowhere in front of him. A mysterious green eye appears amidst the sudden glow. A blue-haired girl kneels and says she has finally found her master. The scene then shifts to a quiet tea house in the city. There, our hero is calmly holding a cup of hot tea. He asks the girl why she followed him there. The young woman introduces herself as Qing Tian and begs to travel with him. With a thoughtful look, the protagonist remains silent for a moment, but he refuses her request on the spot, leaving the girl shocked. Qing Tian is speechless, her face covered by a shadow of disappointment. She starts to cry and asks why he doesn't want her company. In desperation, the girl grabs the young man's leg and begs not to be abandoned. With teary eyes, she says she can change, and the hero asks her to stand up. He explains that he's not abandoning her, but she's just too clingy. The young man then gets closer to explain the real reason. He says her personality is bad, and she could destroy a country if she gets angry. The blue-haired girl says she just wants to stay by her master's side. Sarcastically, the young man says he's very shy and asks if she still wants to stay with him. At that moment, the girl hugs him and he yells that she's only after his body. He pushes her away and says that if she stays close, she'll attack him in the middle of the night. The system's spirit appears and says she wouldn't dare do that. At most, she would just touch him. The protagonist allows her to follow him, but she must stay quiet and not kneel. Qing Tian is happy, thinking her master is worried about her. Our hero laments that he just wanted to end slavery, and now he has a servant. He then remembers there were 5 celestial incarnations and wonders about the others. The system explains that there are 3 women and 2 men in total. Upon hearing that they are all loyal to him, the young man despairs at the amount of trouble. Then he snaps his fingers and calls the girl by her name. Qing Tian responds promptly, saying that her servant is here. The young man asks for her opinion on those who defy the heavens. She replies that they are insolent and greedy people who fought among themselves. He comments that in the past, they stole the spiritual root of the world itself. With a dark look, the girl says that gods died, but the sky is eternal. She then declares him the eternal ruler of the 3 worlds. But the young man says that's not true, because he wouldn't survive a group fight. He stands up and warns that time is running out and they need to get to work. After leaving the tea house, the two start walking through the city streets. Our hero then opens a holographic screen to check some information. He smiles, satisfied, upon seeing on the screen that his plan with the shadows was a success. As they walk, the blue-haired girl says she has a question to ask. She questions why he used the shadows if he could have just given wealth to everyone. The young man flicks her on the forehead and calls her dumb for thinking that way. He explains that if he did that, everyone would regress and turn back into monkeys. The real reason he exists is to maintain order and correct the world's distortions. His duty is to guide people and show them what they can and cannot do. He says that in a world with light, darkness will always exist and asks if she understands. The girl salutes and affirms that she understood everything, but he doesn't seem convinced. Suddenly, his gaze turns to a scene happening nearby. A purple-haired warrior is giving some coins to a beggar on the street. With a smile, the young man points to the scene and says that there's a good example. To prevent her from interfering, he tells her to hide, and the girl turns transparent. The beggar then takes advantage of the woman's distraction and steals her money pouch. With a swift hand, the man grabs the pouch without the warrior noticing the theft. A man next to her warns her to check her wallet while she's helping others. The warrior turns around with eyes red with fury upon realizing what happened. Without a second thought, she lunges forward and stomps hard on the thief who tricked her. With a powerful kick, the warrior hits the beggar right in the midsection. The thief goes flying, and the hero compliments the girl's beautiful leg. After getting rid of the man, the martial artist turns to the protagonist. She then thanks him for the warning and introduces herself as Ah Yi, a martial artist. The young man says she can call him Tian Dao and shakes her hand. Ah Yi feels a bit embarrassed and thanks him again for helping her. Our hero says it was a trivial matter and advises her to pay more attention. The girl says goodbye, mentioning she has tasks to do, but he interrupts her. With a smile, he asks if she can accept a mission from him right now. He thinks that finding an adventurer is the best way to get to know the world. The young man complains that his servant agrees with everything he says without question. Suddenly, the adventurer receives a heavy pouch and is surprised by what she sees. Tian Dao explains that he wants to go to the Western continent and needs company. Yi gets very excited about the proposal and says he can leave it to her. The invisible servant asks if she can speak, but the master tells her to hide. At the Liberty City station, the warrior announces that the carriage is ready. She apologizes for the delay and seems embarrassed about the situation. The girl whispers that they'll be taking a small carriage so as not to attract attention. With that, she says she will introduce him to the friends who will be traveling with them. A Taoist and a priestess introduce themselves as Ahai and Mary. Our hero greets everyone and comments on the strange formation of the group. Excited, they all shout together and get ready to start the journey. With that, the carriage departs at high speed down the dirt road. Inside the vehicle, an awkward silence fills the air. The young man breaks the ice and asks if Mary is a nun from the Church of Light. The priestess smiles, holding a crucifix, and wishes for the God of Light to bless him. Tian Dao becomes thoughtful upon hearing the deity's name and seems to reflect. He remembers that the God of Light from the second cycle was too weak to face him. The nun finds his reaction strange and is unsure what to say. Noticing the tense atmosphere, the young man quickly apologizes for his behavior. He then remembers that the God of Light from the first cycle was defeated by Qing Tian. The servant responds with pride that she's already forgotten about it, as it wasn't a great feat. The coachman comments that it's rare for someone as wealthy as him not to have an escort. With a confident smile, Tian Dao says that no guard is stronger than him. The Taoist and Yi are impressed by the young man's confidence. The coachman notices that the young man's aura is so contained, it's almost imperceptible. A purple aura appears around the protagonist, who smiles at the observation. His dark and powerful energy glows in a frightening way. Suddenly, the scene changes to a dark place full of skulls. The underworld. In the underworld, a dark-haired woman senses a familiar and powerful aura. Chained in a cave, she realizes the energy belongs to her master. In the carriage, the protagonist regrets being careless with his aura. Suddenly, Yi screams and points to something on the road ahead. Their journey is interrupted by a large group of people in their path. The coachman and the nun wonder who they are and think they might be refugees. The young man says they are probably the slaves freed by the shadowy figure. The girls worry because they have nowhere to go and the road is dangerous. Ahai imagines the scene of the massacre and says it's a trafficker's nightmare. In the underworld, a dark-haired woman senses a familiar and powerful aura, but the warrior gets angry and says she's wanted to get rid of them for a long time. The carriage stops next to the refugees who are sitting on the road. Tian Dao then asks for their opinion on whether the action was right or wrong. Yi immediately responds that it was definitely the right thing to do. She asks them to think a little about the situation of the former slaves. In her memories, the slaves suffered and the sacrifice was only temporary. The coachman agrees and says that in return, they gained a free future. The warrior gets excited and says that the shadowy figure did what she would have done, but the nun laments for the slaves already sold and prays for their souls. The protagonist questions the usefulness of her prayer, leaving Mary shocked. With his arms crossed, the protagonist states that the God of Light cannot save those people. The nun gets angry and defends her deity, but the young man says she can't do anything. Yi tries to calm her friend down, saying the young man is just joking with her, but he reveals that it's not a joke because the God of Light can't even save himself. The coachman smiles nervously and comments that the young man is exaggerating a bit. Our hero asks if the Taoist believes in salvation, and he laughs at the question. The warrior agrees that it's better to fight for oneself, and the protagonist praises the idea. Annoyed, Mary questions how they explain human sacrifices to summon rain. The young man is surprised and shows great interest in this new information. He then asks if Ayahe can't create rain, and the coachman says it's impossible. Tian Dao explains that all it takes is an ice talisman and questions the lack of Taoists. The coachman is shocked by the simplicity of the method, as if it were a revelation. The martial artist tries to hold back her laughter, but can't contain herself at the scene. The two girls burst out laughing and think his sense of humor is great. Qing Tian becomes furious and threatens the girls, but her master stops her at once. He calms her with a touch on her chest, and she gets embarrassed by the gesture. The young man wonders why she became quiet so suddenly this time. With a red face and hearts in her eyes, the servant stammers his name. He realizes the situation and gets annoyed with the girl's exaggerated reaction. With a determined look, the hero opens a screen and says he knows what to do now. On the screen, he jots down his plan, but highlights the part about avoiding Qing Tian's attacks. As night falls, the group camps near a cave to spend the night safely. The Taoist then uses powerful fire magic to light the campfire. With a gesture, he creates flames to warm everyone during the cold night. They tell the hero to rest while they take turns keeping watch over the camp. The system warns that there are 3 third-level beasts and many others nearby. Suddenly, a giant foot appears next to the protagonist, almost crushing him. It's the servant, who warns him about a group of undead approaching. But the young man ignores her and simply covers himself to sleep peacefully. He tells her to stand guard and do nothing while he takes a nap. The blue-haired girl watches her master sleep with his eyes closed. With a mischievous smile, she wishes him good night in a very suspicious way. At that moment, a talisman flies out of nowhere and hits her right in the face. Confused, the girl rips the paper off her face and wonders what it is. The note prohibits nighttime attacks and warns her to act at her own risk. Desolate, the servant cries under a spotlight of disappointment, her soul leaving her body. Far away, Ah Yi and Ah Hai are talking and planning to get married after the mission. The hero observes the scene and realizes they are raising a death flag. The couple looks at each other lovingly, dreaming of the future they will have together. Suddenly, the Taoist's face fills with panic as he sees something terrifying. The Taoist screams for everyone to wake up, and the warrior warns about the danger outside. From the top of the cliff, the martial artist observes a green mist in the forest. Her eyes widen in fear as she sees what is approaching in the darkness of the night. It's a terrifying skull with green smoke coming out of its empty eye sockets. Then she realizes it's a legion of undead led by a bone dragon. Our hero yawns and asks if the cycle of reincarnation doesn't exist in this world. The system spirit then appears and confirms that the cycle is broken. Annoyed, the young man demands an explanation of how something like this could happen. The system reveals that reincarnation was destroyed by 2 very powerful beings. He wonders why, with so much power, they didn't just pierce the heavens. The spirit explains that they pierced the world's barrier and brought chaos. With this, he understands that force only resolves enemies, not problems. The leader of the undead stares at him and says he has finally found a human. The warrior is terrified upon realizing that the creature can even speak. The priestess approaches the protagonist and apologizes for what she said earlier. With her face pale with fear, she believes this will be the end for all of them. The horde has a necromancer, a death knight, and countless zombie soldiers. Ahai says that unless the young man is stronger, they will die right there. The cross-shaped staff in the nun's hand then falls to the ground in her despair. She kneels in a panic and prays, saying the gods will save her from the danger. Our hero says that he really doesn't like to see people kneeling. Confused, the Taoist tries to get the young master's attention, who seems different. Then he turns to the horde and asks if the undead have any intelligence. The leader of the Skeletal Legion is confused by the young man's unexpected question. With a dark smile on his lips, he seems to be preparing for battle. An aura of blue energy explodes from him as he asks if they want to fight. With a threatening look, he repeats the question and challenges the entire legion. The army of skeletons is engulfed by the hero's immense wave of power. The undead soldiers are terrified by his display of strength. As they roar in fury, the protagonist faces them with complete tranquility. His servant appears, and he says he will deal with the creatures that lack intelligence. A giant blade of blue energy forms in the heavens, ready for the attack. The energy sword descends and destroys all the skeletons in its path. With a dark smile on his lips, he seems to be preparing for battle. The Death Knight realizes he cannot attack such a powerful man. With a sigh of boredom, the young man seems disappointed by the lack of a challenge. He praises the creature's intelligence for sacrificing its own soldiers. The system corrects him, but he says he's going to fix the cycle of reincarnation. The Death Knight agrees with him, but seems to have other plans. He declares that the weak must be eliminated, and the group is in shock. The remaining skulls scream in anger and release a sinister green smoke. Suddenly, new skeletons sprout from the ground and rush to attack the group. The blue-haired warrior destroys one with a punch, and the Taoist uses a talisman. Observing from a distance, our hero just smiles at the situation. He then explains that he hired these people to talk, not to fight. Taking a step forward, he says no one will touch them before the mission is over. Then, with a serious look, the young man warns that they cannot lay a hand on anyone. He stomps his foot hard on the ground and releases a gigantic wave of blue energy. The power spreads rapidly and begins to crack all the earth around them. The energy travels throughout the forest, creating enormous spikes of blue crystal. With this, all the undead in the group are thrown into the air by the impact. A huge fissure opens in the ground and swallows the Death Knight and his minions. All the creatures fall helplessly into the abyss that formed in the ground. The leader of the undead is shocked by the young man's unimaginable strength. The group's nun looks at the crater and says that Master Tian Dao is very strong. The system spirit questions him, but he says that force is what resolves enemies. He becomes serious again and seems to be looking for something. The protagonist looks at a pile of bones and tells the leader to stop hiding. From behind the rubble, a purple-haired girl slowly stands up. Afraid, she introduces herself as Ymir, a member of the Church of Necromancers. With her face sweating in fear, the girl begs for his forgiveness. The young man praises her for being polite, and the white-haired servant scoffs in jealousy. He says he's not unreasonable and that anyone can come and go from that place. The young man warns her to pay attention in the future, and the necromancer thanks him. With that, the girl shouts for her minions to make way for her to leave. The creatures open a corridor in the middle of the fissure for their master to pass. Then, our hero starts walking towards his companions. Impressed, the Taoist wonders what the young master's true strength is. But the group's nun seems very dissatisfied with the current situation. With a dark face, she seems to disagree with her master's decision. Suddenly, the nun shouts at the young master, saying he can't just leave them. The religious woman points to the skeletons and says they are too dangerous. With a sideways glance, he turns to hear what the girl has to say. With his back to her, the young man asks what she suggests he do then. The woman shouts that since he is stronger, he should finish them all off right there. The religious woman grabs him and yells that he'll become a hero, and the servant gets startled. With a simple movement, the young man frees himself from the nun's hand, leaving her confused. The young man questions her logic, and the servant beside him looks sad. The religious woman is shocked by the question and stammers the master's name. He explains that to the god of light, the undead were not evil. The young man says that everyone in the world should be equal, regardless of anything. Then he questions if it's not wrong to destroy those who think differently, just because you're strong. The warrior asks if he knows the primordial god of light. The young man then replies that it's impossible for him to know a deity. The girl apologizes, and the hero thinks that the goddess isn't even qualified for heaven. The girl thanks him and tries to return the money he gave her for the mission, but the master refuses, saying that the conversation with them was very good. A system screen appears, and he adds religious beliefs to his list. With that, the young man says goodbye to the group, saying he needs to go now. But he turns around and remembers he has one more thing to say to all of them. The protagonist says that gods are real, but they are just stronger people. After saying goodbye, the young man and his servant disappear in a beam of light. The martial artist asks if he is a god, and the Taoist agrees. Far away, floating in the night sky, the hero talks with his servant. The white-haired girl asks why he saved those mortals. The master explains that they are the key to fixing the world's chaos. Then he scolds her and says to always put people first. With a mischievous smile, the servant asks what their next destination is. Then the young master creates a portal of energy and departs for another place. With a confident smile, the young man points upward and says that their destination is hell. In the stormy sky, some skull-shaped souls float aimlessly. The place is a desolate landscape with giant thorns and a palace in the background. Then we see the creatures that live there, which are zombies with glowing eyes. The undead wander through a cemetery of giant bones and green mist. Suddenly, a portal of dark energy opens in the sky and spins rapidly. From it, two beams of blue light descend at high speed. The beams of energy hit the ground hard and cause a large explosion. Next, our hero stylishly steps on some bones that were there. The young man comments that this is a unique reception for hell. The system spirit explains that this is the realm of death and reincarnation, but the young man says all he sees is just a pile of dead trash. The servant offers to clean up the mess, but her master stops her. He says they are just low-level creatures, and the girl agrees with him. The system asks why he has no prejudice against the undead. The hero explains that they became this way because the cycle was broken. Then we see an image showing the broken state of reincarnation. The white-haired girl asks what they should do next. The protagonist and his servant prepare to fix the broken cycle. With a smile, he says he will rebuild the cycle of reincarnation. The system's spirit interrupts the young man and asks him to wait a moment. He warns that rebuilding the cycle will consume a lot of power and leave him weak. The system explains that he could withstand one blow, but a second one would injure him badly. The blue creature then warns that he cannot be disturbed, or he will fail. With that, our hero starts to think of a solution to this problem. His servant observes him with a confused expression, not understanding the plan. Then, with a mischievous smile on his face, he seems to have an idea. Suddenly, the master grabs her hand and pulls her close to him. The young man puts her in a dance pose and holds her firmly by the waist. With a seductive look, he says that only she can help him at that moment. The girl turns completely red, and an aura of green energy envelops her. He asks her to lend him her power so they can recreate the cycle together. The master smiles as he absorbs the energy from his infatuated servant. With their combined power, a protective barrier forms around them. Then he says the recreation can begin, and the girl seems very happy. The young man combines her energy with the dark sphere of reincarnation. The energy rises to the heavens and forms a large, bright sphere of light. The undead look up and see the light that illuminates all of hell. In a pile of bones, a skeletal hand begins to rise. The skeleton reconstructs itself and looks for its head in the middle of the mess. With a smile, the skeleton finds its head in the middle of the pile of bones. He puts his head in place and looks at the sphere of light shining in the sky. This is the Ghost Emperor, and he finds it strange that reincarnation is happening now. The creature looks intently at the light, trying to understand what is happening. Then he realizes that the Celestial Tao is repairing the cycle and is shocked. The Emperor remembers how he and Yuan Xuan fought for the power of reincarnation. The battle damaged the cycle, which is why it remained broken until that moment. The skeleton wonders why the cycle wants to restore itself now if it was ignored before. He also notices that the Tao's appearance has changed and wonders what he is planning. But the Emperor decides he will take advantage of the hero's weakness and won't be polite. Suddenly, a nearby zombie regains consciousness and asks who he is. The Ghost Emperor is surprised to see the creature regain its sanity. Other undead also begin to remember their past lives. The skull realizes that the Celestial Tao's power to do this is terrifying. With a smile, he thinks that waiting for the others to revive will help his plan. He then realizes that the restoration will not only benefit the undead. With that, the Emperor decides to spare the young man and lies down to wait for the right moment. Meanwhile, other powerful beings from hell are attracted by the energy. Various demons and creatures rush to see the restoration of the cycle up close. Inside the barrier, the servant warns her master that some flies are approaching. The master smiles and tells her not to get distracted because he has his own plans. With a snap of his fingers, the young master puts his plan into action. Out of nowhere, an energy clone of the young man appears in the sky of hell. The clone then takes on the task of protecting its original body from enemies. The servant asks why he made a clone if she could have fought for him. He imagines her as a monster destroying everything and says he has his reasons. The clone then gives the creatures two choices: either they leave or they die. The demons look at each other in silence and don't seem intimidated by the threat. The creatures shout that in hell, strength is the only rule, and they charge forward. The hero's copy calls them all greedy and says he understands the old Taos. With that, the fight begins, and the clone easily defeats several enemies at once. Suddenly, a skeletal mage appears behind the energy clone. This is Oz, a legendary mage who casts a gravity spell 100 times stronger. The hero's copy is caught by surprise and starts to feel the weight of the magic. A beam of purple energy hits the ground and creates a gravitational field, but the clone gets up and says that a spell like this can't stop him. Then, an assassin from the rat race named Slaughter appears to attack. The rat moves at high speed towards the hero's barrier. He gets closer and shouts that this is his chance to attack the original body. The servant warns about the surprise attack, but the master seems very calm. Our hero hugs her and tells her not to get distracted, even for a second. Meanwhile, the clone warns the assassin not to underestimate him like that. With a quick movement, the copy grabs the creature's head with its hand. Then he throws the rat with all his force to the ground, opening a huge crater. The assassin is left fallen and immobilized in the middle of the debris, unable to get out. The copy warns the others that he's going to play a little, but not to go too far. A demon with horns ignores the warning and shouts for everyone to attack together. With that, several creatures fly up at him, but the clone calls them stubborn. With a malicious smile, he says he will show them his true power. He then decides to show them the absolute difference in strength between them right there. Suddenly, ice spikes begin to cover the bodies of all the demons. The creatures are terrified as they realize they are slowly freezing. With a serious look, the clone points at them and orders them all to kneel. Several beams of light descend from the sky and pin all the enemies to the ground. The horned demon screams in desperation that he can't move at all. The copy then faces the few creatures that manage to escape the attack. The two demon women are shocked by the young man's frightening strength, but suddenly, a malicious laugh echoes through hell, startling the two girls. A knight on a bone mount says it's been a while since he had so much fun. This is Wang Hai, a skeleton knight who wants to test the clone's strength. The sharp-toothed demon recognizes the knight and shouts the name Wang Hai. He explains that the newcomer was the strongest dragon knight of the first era. The skeleton says the celestial treasure is his and that he is the strongest in hell. With his spear in hand, he threatens to kill anyone who gets in his way. But the clone smiles confidently and says the knight will not succeed. The skeletal warrior faces the copy with a malicious smile on his lips. Suddenly, Wang Hai releases a wave of red energy at the other demons. The energy hits the other creatures who are trapped on the ground head-on. With this, the monsters scream in pain as they are disintegrated by his power. The energy of everyone combines and forms a bright purple sphere of pure power. The demons are astonished by the fearsome knight's strong blood, chi. The skeletal warrior spins his spear and prepares to launch an attack. He launches his 8-direction strike and creates a tornado of red energy. The hero's copy faces the attack coming in his direction very calmly. Then the clone simply closes his fist, ready for a counterattack. With a single punch, he stops the knight's blow, who is left in shock. The copy appears in front of the enemy and grabs his face with his hand. Next, the clone lands a powerful punch and sends the warrior flying far away. Flying through the air, the knight wonders how that could be possible. At that moment, the sphere of light shines intensely and illuminates all of hell. The knight's bone mount shatters into pieces on the ground. The other demons look at the scene, shocked and speechless. The copy asks with an air of superiority if they find him too strong. Then he turns and faces the 3 demons that still remain there. A screen identifies the trio as Hawa, Gulao, and Daisy, very powerful beings. With a smile, he notices that there are still people who haven't fled the scene. The copy then approaches and asks if the 3 of them also want to fight him. The sharp-toothed demon shouts that they wouldn't dare do such a thing. Afraid, he says he just wants to know his name and what he came there to do. The clone says there's no need to ask because they will know the answer soon enough. At that moment, the 3 of them turn and look at the light of reincarnation. The serpent woman is impressed by the intensity of the shining light. The sphere of energy explodes in a flash that illuminates the entire sky of hell. The demon comments that this is a law he will never comprehend. The serpent woman says he is not manipulating the law, but he is the law itself. The girl with the book on her face understands that he is rebuilding the cycle. The serpent demon shouts the word reincarnation in shock upon understanding everything. The clone says they don't need to guess anymore because they will soon know the truth. With that, the light from the sphere intensifies and shines even brighter in the sky. The undead look up and are bathed in the light of purification. With the purifying light, the skin of the undead begins to peel away. The young man celebrates happily for having become human again, with flesh and blood. Around him, several souls in the form of blue flames begin to float. These flames are actually the souls that have been freed from suffering. The clone's hand then approaches a very colorful energy flower. He smiles, satisfied, upon completing the process, and the girl beside him congratulates him. The hero looks at the landscape and says that hell will finally work. Suddenly, a malicious laugh echoes, and a pale hand appears on the scene. Sitting on a pile of skulls, a woman says that this is the celestial Tao. She is impressed with the ease of restoring the souls of hell. With a smile, the girl says she really needs to thank him very much for that. With red eyes, she reveals herself as the newly formed Ghost Empress. As the people celebrate below, the 3 demons watch from above. The woman with the book on her face comments that the souls of the dead are being restored. The sharp-toothed demon says that not even the strongest can do this. Frightened, He looks at the clone's silhouette and shouts that it is the Celestial Tao. Then the protagonist and his companion appear with a very imposing aura. With this, the two demons are shocked by their intimidating presence. The serpent woman nervously asks if he really is the so-called Celestial Tao. The girl gets angry at her audacity, but the young man tells her to calm down. With a smile, the hero confirms that he is the true Celestial Tao. The demons are in shock, and the woman with the mask pinches her friend to wake him up. The serpent woman is terrified as she remembers the catastrophe of the second cycle. The protagonist approaches and says he has a question to ask her. He wants to know how several powerful experts avoided the great battles. The serpent demon gets very nervous, not knowing what to answer the young man. Then she replies that it was because of the inner world of each of them. The girl explains that with resources, they can survive an annihilating power. The hero understands that they resisted by using their own small worlds. He then asks if they could unite to resist the Celestial Tao. The woman with the book says they tried, but only 12 people survived. The serpent creature then asks why he caused that great catastrophe. In his thoughts, the young man knows they wouldn't understand that he was forced to. The hero concludes that he has no choice but to take the blame for everything. The young man explains that beings at her level inevitably touch upon the law, but since no one wants to share power, they end up fighting among themselves. The young man says that the chances of the Celestial Day should be equal for everyone. But little by little, this chance is controlled by a few powerful experts. He uses the cycle of reincarnation as an example, which was taken from hell. Because of an ancient fight, the cycle ended up being divided and taken away. Since then, reincarnation stopped, and this led to the tragic situation in hell. The hero explains that destroying the world allowed more people to live. The girl with the book on her face says they just wanted to get stronger in the past. The hero explains that destroying the world allowed more people to live. With a smile, he offers the three a chance to join his organization. At this, the trio of demons is completely shocked by the young man's proposal. His companion says they are weak, but the hero says he needs help. The young man then explains that they are peak existences in the three realms. The young man says the current cycle of reincarnation isn't truly complete. He explains that the cycle absorbs weak souls but doesn't affect the stronger ones. In these cases, he needs experts like them to help with the task. Then an image shows the three of them, forcing a powerful soul to reincarnate. The hero decides to call this new profession Ghost Hunters with a smile. He has also already chosen a name for the organization, which will be called Hades. With that, he asks if the trio is willing to join Hades. The sharp-toothed demon and the masked woman exchange apprehensive glances. Suddenly, the young man's assistant shoots a threatening look at the trio. The two of them panic and accept the proposal on the spot without even thinking. However, the serpent woman still seems a bit hesitant about the offer. The assistant gets irritated by the serpent woman's audacity, but the young man calms her down. He then asks if her condition is for him to heal her wounds, and the girl confirms. With that, the creature turns her back and starts to show something to the two of them. She reveals a large wound left by a wolf that can only be healed in the forest. Upon hearing about the elven forest, the young man decides he needs to pay a visit there. The young man accepts the girl's request, and she is very grateful for his help. He says that Hades still needs a manager, and the assistant has a suggestion. The girl says that Yuming Tian is the best candidate to manage the organization. The hero repeats the name as an information screen appears in front of him. The screen reveals that she was an expert who was defeated in the past. He asks the system if it's possible to revive her, and the answer is positive. Happy with the news, the young man decides he will revive Yuming Tian right now. The trio of demons is speechless and just watches the scene without understanding anything. At that, the protagonist and his companion fly away from the place at high speed. Flying through the skies, the assistant turns and asks her master something. She asks why they need to go to the forest if he can easily heal the woman. He says she wouldn't understand, but this way, it seems like he's completing a mission. The girl is completely confused by her companion's answer. After a while, the two arrive at a mountain and prepare to act. With a serious and determined look, the young man faces his next destination. Arriving at the location, the young man finds a woman chained in a cave. This woman is Yuming Tian, and she is trapped with several chains and seals. The hero then slowly approaches and extends his hand to her face. Carefully, he touches the girl's chin to check her current condition. He notices that her body is still completely intact, despite everything. The young man notes that her aura is as strong as Kinkden's. The system reminds him that Kinkdian is the weakest, and the assistant jokes about it. Without further ado, he decides he will revive the woman right now. A screen warns that, to do this, he needs to transfer his origin power. The system then asks if he is sure he wants to revive her. The young man thinks that if she dies again, his power will be lost forever. With that in mind, he decides to give her only 1% of his power. He creates a small, bright blue sphere of energy in his hands. Upon releasing the energy, a wave of power explodes and spreads through the cave. The assistant is pushed back by the force of the energy explosion. The energy expands and illuminates the entire mountain with its blue light. As the people celebrate below, the three demons watch from above. Suddenly, the energy hits the trio head-on, and they become desperate. They scream in pain, feeling the pressure, and think he is going to destroy hell. The wave of blue power sweeps across the landscape, disintegrating the bones on the ground. The Ghost Empress is also hit by the strong wave of blue energy. She wonders what the Celestial Tao is doing, and if he realized she didn't die. In the cave, the hero still holds the small sphere of energy in his hand. With that, he clenches his fist and stops releasing his terrifying power. His assistant looks at him a little worried and calls him master. In the cave, the hero still holds the small sphere of energy in his hand. Then he kneels in front of the chained woman to begin the process. The young man touches the energy sphere to the girl's chest to transfer the power. The blue energy begins to enter the body of the unconscious woman. A strong light breaks the chains and seals that held her in the cave. At that moment, the woman finally opens her eyes, which now glow green. In the reflection of her eye, you can see the image of the kneeling protagonist. With the woman finally free, the two stare at each other in silence for a moment. Suddenly, the newly revived woman jumps into the young man's arms and hugs him tightly. She says she is finally reunited with him after so much time apart. With tears in her eyes, the girl looks at him and calls him master. She continues to hug the young man very closely, not wanting to let him go at all. Jealous, the assistant separates the two and says they don't need to be so close. The black-haired woman apologizes, and the other says it's good that she knows. The protagonist stands there without reacting, just observing the little argument. Yu Mingtian kneels and thanks her master, promising not to disappoint him. The young man observes her in silence for a moment before speaking to the girl. He then says that this time he has a very important mission to give her. The young man appoints her as the manager of Hades to build and protect the cycle of reincarnation. The system says that's 2 tasks, but the young man doesn't care about that detail. The assistant comments that her personality is no different from Kinkdian's. The young man says he'll go crazy if she acts the same, because one is already enough. The newly revived woman asks with a sad look if her master won't stay there. The white-haired girl explains that he still has other things to resolve. With that, the young man pats her on the head and asks her to have more confidence. He says he has already rebuilt the cycle and that she just needs to be the queen of Hades. The black-haired woman takes a deep breath and prepares to make an announcement. A wave of purple energy expands throughout hell with her power. She announces herself to everyone as the head of Hades, who will manage hell. The girl orders the artisans to design and the undead to build. The most powerful will enter the human realm as ghosts to guide spirits. The Ghost Empress observes everything from afar and doesn't seem to like it at all. She then threatens that whoever does not obey will be an enemy of the Celestial Tao. The hero comments that she is amazing, and the system says she was once a leader. With a smile, he concludes that there will be no problems, leaving Hades with her. The assistant asks her master what their next destination will be now. With a smile, he concludes that there will be no problems leaving Hades with her. Soon we see the majestic elven forest with its giant, glowing tree. Nearby, a caravan of bandits travels through the forest with several carts. The men comment that the captured elves are of high quality and worth a lot. Inside a cage, a blonde elf is sitting on the floor, sad and tied up. The girl seems desolate with the situation she finds herself in at the moment. The group's leader then tells his men not to be careless around there. He insists that everyone stay alert until they leave this dangerous forest. This is Sabi, the leader of the bandits, a very powerful Earth Dragon Knight. A henchman says he is being too careful and asks who would stop them. At that moment, they spot the silhouette of a person standing in the path. The mysterious figure wears dark armor with a very somber aura. The bandit shouts furiously, asking who dares to block his group's path. The knight in dark armor simply points his finger in their direction. He faces the group of bandits with a very intimidating posture. The leader Sabi smiles and asks if the stranger is trying to steal his loot. The man in armor then summons a giant sword of dark energy. The bandits start to laugh and mock him for using such a weapon on foot. With a firm step, the mysterious knight advances to face the enemies. Suddenly, a bright blue magic circle appears under the knight. He summons a huge and terrifying black dragon to fight by his side. The bandit leader panics upon seeing the divine dragon species. The elves in the cage celebrate, thinking the elven god has sent a messenger. But the more serious blonde elf says no, because he doesn't look like an elven angel. She finds it strange that the black silhouette doesn't look like a savior of the elves. Afraid, Sabi tries to negotiate and offers 2 elves as slaves to the knight. Mounted on his dragon, the mysterious warrior makes a gesture of refusal with his hand. Then he slowly closes his hand, preparing to attack the group. With a serious look, the knight says he doesn't want just 2, but all of them. The leader Sabi gets furious and shouts that he doesn't know the risk he took to capture them. He says his dragon doesn't feel any suppression, so the knight must be a fake. With that, the bandits advance all together to attack the man and his dragon. The dark creature then opens its mouth and prepares a blue fire attack. Next, the dragon fires a blast of energy that goes straight for the bandits. The leader is shocked to see his own mount being hit by the fire. With his face sweating coldly, the bandit can't believe what he's seeing. The black dragon attacks with fury and throws all the enemies far away. The henchmen fly through the air as they are defeated by the creature's power. A large explosion of energy sweeps through the forest and destroys everything in its path. The leader of the bandits is completely terrified by the enemy's power. In a panic, he shouts for the mysterious knight not to get any closer to him. But the armored warrior just sends a wave of energy in his direction. With the force of the attack, the bandit leader is thrown far away. The released energy also destroys the cage where the elves were trapped. With the cart broken to pieces, the 3 girls are finally free. The savior approaches and stands in front of the elves he rescued. The blonde girl thanks him emotionally for saving all their lives. Seeing an opening, Sabi tries to attack the armored man from behind. The elf notices the betrayal and screams desperately for him to be very careful. Without even looking back, the knight raises his hand and stops the enemy's attack. At that moment, the warrior's sword pierces the chest of the bandit leader. Shocked, Sabi can't understand how the knight managed to do that. He then falls to the ground, lifeless, with the sword embedded in his back. The other henchmen scream that the leader has been defeated and start to flee. Desperate, the men run into the forest, calling the knight a monster. But suddenly, one of the elves points frighteningly at something in the woods. An arrow hits one of the fleeing bandits right in the head. In front of them, elves and wooden creatures appear, blocking the path. An archer announces that the 3rd Brigade has arrived to save the elves. One of the elves points and tells his companion to look at the scene a little ahead. He says that is the divine dragon knight who saved their companions. Meanwhile, one of the warriors immobilizes a bandit and threatens him furiously. At that moment, the protagonist removes his helmet, revealing a surprising face. He is actually an elf with a celestial appearance and blindfolded eyes. The aggressor elf gets angry at something and shouts for the mysterious knight to behave. But suddenly, something hits the blonde warrior head-on, startling him. With the force of the blow, the young man is thrown far away, leaving his allies in shock. The brigade leader stares at the man, surprised by his sudden action. With that, everyone prepares to fight against who attacked their companion. At that, the rescued elf runs in front of her savior and asks everyone to stop. The archer and her group are confused by the attitude of the newly freed girl. She explains that he did nothing wrong because he treats all lives equally. The troop leader is confused and asks what the young woman means by that. To prove his point, the mysterious man begins to untie the hostage's ropes. The short-haired girl thanks him for finally freeing her from the bonds. The blonde girl explains that his rule is to only attack those who traffic other beings. So, as long as they don't get involved with slavery, the warrior won't attack them. Understanding the situation, the leader turns and orders that no one take prisoners. Our protagonist then stands up while one of the girls watches him attentively. Suddenly, the mysterious warrior begins to dissolve into particles of light. The troop leader is shocked and wonders if he simply vanished into thin air. With a smile, the rescued elf thanks the nameless stranger for all his help. Far away, in another place, our protagonist sneezes out of nowhere. His companion asks if he's okay, but the young man says his nose just itched. We then see that the two were floating and observing the scene from above. The silver-haired girl looks down and comments that something happened there. Our hero smiles and explains that it was the law he created taking effect. At that, some small green flames appear in front of him, ready to act. The energy spheres then fly quickly towards the battlefield. With an intense glow, the flames hit the ground and create a magic circle. From inside it, hooded figures emerge, who are soul hunters. The blonde elf is astonished by the apparition while helping her friend get loose. From the bodies of the bandits, souls in the form of blue ghosts begin to emerge. The soul of one of the men screams in pain as a collar appears on his neck. The Reapers tell the spirit to behave and stop struggling now. They then drag the souls to the sky, saying they will take them to the underworld. The rescued girl looks up and wonders what those creatures were. Then the troop leader tells her to return with the group to the city of Kyle. The girl agrees but wonders if she was the only person who could see all that. The hero observes the souls ascending and comments that the cycle of reincarnation is working well. His companion gets excited, saying it's all thanks to him, but the young man tells her to focus. With a determined look, he talks about the duo's next destination. At this, we see the elven capital, Kyle, a city built in a giant tree. The city has tall towers and impressive architecture among the trees. Arriving there, the rescued elves are informed that they will be cleaning the city from now on. The blonde girl receives a broom from a guard and accepts the task somewhat awkwardly. She stands still for a moment, holding the broom with a thoughtful expression. Then the young woman looks at the large tree and thinks that she has finally managed to return home. While sweeping the street, a luxurious carriage passes right by the elf. The girl observes the scene with a surprised expression on her face. She continues sweeping as the carriage enters through the city gates. The carriage stops on one of the stone streets of the elven capital. At that moment, a person with elegant shoes gets out of the mysterious vehicle. Our hero and his partner look around, and he comments on the elves everywhere. Then he touches her ear and tells her to disguise them to blend in. They pass by a noble, asking a servant about the day's minerals. Further ahead, the protagonist sees poor people on the street begging for change. He comments that although he has no problem with nobles, the inequality depresses him. The little creature says he could finish them off, but the young man tells her to shut up. The hero says that the oppressed must fight for themselves to achieve equality. His little fairy praises him, and the young man takes the comment as a compliment. Changing the subject, he seems to remember something important for their mission. He comments that the world tree looks healthy and asks if it has to do with the elven god. His partner then asks if the master wants to find the elven deity, and he confirms. She suggests burning the tree to force the goddess to appear, but he stops her at once. The young man flicks her and says he just wants to talk without needing a fight. The partner complains that the goddess was a rebel in the second cycle, and there's nothing to talk about. With another flick, he says that's precisely why it's even more important to talk to her. The protagonist explains that he needs to know what these rebels are really thinking. With a smile, he says that those who make many friends end up having fewer enemies in the end. The companion agrees that her master is wise while holding her sore head. Suddenly, the two hear someone shouting for them to get out of the way immediately. A carriage at high speed comes towards them and scatters the commoners on the street. The vehicle almost runs over the two of them as the driver shouts for them to get out of the way. A young elf is driving the carriage and shouts for them to obey her orders. The girl is the elven princess, Yatia, and she warns that she won't be responsible if they die. Our hero stands still, facing the approaching carriage without showing any fear. The creature pulling the vehicle roars in his face, but the young man remains motionless. With just one hand, he easily stops the creature using a mysterious power. With his power, the young man stops the carriage, which skids sharply in front of him. He then watches in silence as the spoiled princess continues on her way. His companion reveals that she is Princess Yitia, a rank 3 elf. The little creature gets irritated and imagines a severe punishment for the arrogant noble. Suddenly, a long-haired girl runs past our hero, leaving him surprised. The princess's carriage continues recklessly and almost runs over an elderly elf on the street. With that, the girl from before runs to save the old man, shouting for him to be careful. Enveloped in a green aura, she pushes the old man and saves him from imminent danger. Princess Yitia shouts at them furiously, telling the commoners to watch where they're going. On the ground, the young blonde girl and the man she saved recover from the big scare. The girl asks worriedly if the elderly elf is okay, and he confirms that he is. With a sad look, she wonders why the elves have become so cruel. The old man thanks her and asks that the mother goddess of the elves protect her always. Upon hearing the mention of the deity, the girl becomes thoughtful and repeats the goddess's name. Observing the scene, our protagonist praises the girl's rare kindness in that place. The young woman then turns to him and asks suspiciously who he really is. With a smile, he replies that he is just a curious passerby and nothing more. He approaches and asks the old man if the princess has always been so rude, and he confirms. The man explains the hierarchy, where gray and black elves are just slaves. The blonde girl gets angry and shouts that this situation is not right at all. She says that the status of elves should never be decided by someone's birth. The older elf explains that the reason for this is the difference in their lifespan. He says that golden elves live 5,000 years longer than the gray ones. The little creature comments on the long life, and the hero explains their low fertility. The little being explains that the stronger a person is, the lower their chance of having children. Our hero then wonders if he could have a baby, and his partner reacts. With a scary face, she seems to like the idea, and this frightens the young man. The white-haired girl asks if the master wants a child and says she accepts. With that, she grabs the protagonist and asks how many children he wants to have. The old man observes the scene and comments with a laugh that young people are very energetic. Then he says goodbye to the girl and leaves, leaving her thoughtful. With tears in her eyes, she laments that the elves shouldn't be like this. The young man approaches and says that the elves have changed since she ruled. He then asks if he is right and calls her by the name of Lulucia. With a smile, he reveals that she is the former mother goddess of the elves. Angrily, the girl releases a wave of green energy that pushes everyone away. Floating in the air, the goddess furiously asks who the man in front of her is. He smiles and asks if she, a rebel, doesn't recognize the celestial Tao. She replies that it's impossible because the Tao she saw was very different from him. Noticing the confusion, the hero thinks he needs to explain it in another way. With a snap of his fingers, our hero prepares to show his true power. At this, a barrier of blue energy with hexagonal patterns appears over the city. The goddess is shocked to see that the technological barrier has trapped them there. She then realizes that her power has been completely blocked by the young man's technique. Suddenly, he appears in front of her and holds her chin very firmly. With a confident smile, the young man asks if she finally believes him now. The goddess panics and can't believe her opponent's speed. The hero traps her with a mysterious energy and dusts off his shoulder. With a determined look, the goddess decides she needs to attack first to have a chance. With that, the girl advances and tries to land a powerful punch on the protagonist's face. But the young man moves quickly to dodge her attack with ease. Suddenly, his companion appears and blocks the blow with her own leg. The white-haired girl shouts furiously at the goddess for being rude to her master. Angrily, she delivers a powerful kick that goes straight towards the rebel. The impact of the blow is so strong that it throws the former goddess far away. She realizes her soul is still weak and decides she needs to escape now. The goddess then uses her staff and creates a magic circle to teleport. But to her surprise, the teleportation spell shatters into several pieces. Our hero comments that she is a rank 5 mage, which is very rare in this world. But he smiles and says that unfortunately for her, her opponent is the celestial Tao. With that, the goddess screams in pain as she is hit by the energy of the blue barrier. The energy dome glows intensely, and a beam of light hits the ground with force. With the impact, she falls into a crater on the ground, completely defeated and powerless. The girl is desperate and can't believe she can't teleport out. Suddenly, a foot steps on her head, pinning her to the ground with great brutality. The hero's partner sits on the goddess and twists her arm, making her scream in pain. Then the white-haired girl lifts her by the hair with a very furious look. Angrily, she calls her a rebel and says she has finally managed to capture her. Seeing the scene, our hero smiles and tells his companion, named Kinkyun, to let her go. But his partner complains and says the goddess is a rebel against heaven. With a more serious look, the young man insists and repeats the order for her to let go now. With that, the girl reluctantly obeys and releases the goddess, who remains kneeling on the ground. The protagonist then approaches and asks if she now believes he is the Tao. With a bruised face and still on the ground, the girl reluctantly nods in agreement. He places his hand on her shoulder and tells her not to be nervous, as he just wants to ask something. The goddess thinks that in this situation, not even Dongfang Haoshan would escape, so she must cooperate. She then asks what he wants to know, and our hero likes her cooperation. With a serious look, he asks the first question and wants to know what the rebels' plan is. To everyone's surprise, the goddess simply replies that she has no idea. She explains that even though she was a rebel from the second cycle, she doesn't know the plans for the third. His companion gets angry and tries to hit the goddess, thinking she is lying. With that, our hero holds her back and tells his partner to be honest with him. The white-haired girl explains that the elven gods are weak among the rebels. So he asks his second question and wants to know why the goddess hates heaven. With a sad and bitter smile, she responds by asking why she would hate it. She explains that in the first cycle, she was born along with the world tree as a goddess. Like a stained glass window, we see that she and the tree guarded the birth of the elves. But at the end of the cycle, she saw a terrible catastrophe that destroyed everything around her. With a sad and bitter smile, she responds by asking why she would hate it. Our hero then understands that the previous Dao's action resulted in a lot of hatred. He asks his last question and wants to know what the most important thing is to her. The goddess is thoughtful for a moment, looking at the ground seriously. She then replies that she just wants to live and protect her people forever. Our protagonist questions if she can really do that as a protector. The goddess gets angry and asks what he means, but the hero says that facts speak louder. With a snap of his fingers, he tells the girl to see the truth with her own eyes. At this, a pillar of blue energy appears and envelops everyone with its intense glow. Then they are teleported to a dark mine in the elven forest. Inside, they see several elves working in very poor conditions. The goddess is shocked and asks where they are, and the hero reveals it's a good place. The goddess screams in horror at the brutal scene she is witnessing in the mine. One of the slaves screams in pain as he is whipped by one of the guards of that place. The guard threatens the others, saying that if they delay the delivery, they will all be punished. The foremen continue to whip the slaves and shout for them to move along. The goddess is furious and can't believe they treat their own people like this. The hero explains that he can only prevent trafficking, but not pure slavery. She then understands that the black figures are his work and wonders when he became good. She questions his objective in saving slaves, but he says she misunderstood. Our protagonist explains that not all slaves come from illegal trafficking. With a serious look, he asks if she also wishes to save prisoners and criminals. He says that what he dislikes is the trafficking of people, not slavery itself. Shocked, the goddess finds herself being held tightly by the young man, very close. He holds her by the chin and tells her not to shift her responsibility onto him. She doesn't understand and asks why he doesn't save more people with all his power. At this, the young man squeezes her cheeks hard, making her complain in pain. He tells her to think about what she did when the Celestial Tao tried to change everything before. The hero questions her about the reasons for the world's problems, like reincarnation. She shouts that they just wanted a better life, but the hero interrupts her on the spot. He points to the guards whipping the slaves and shows her the cruel truth. The goddess screams in desperation that it's not true and denies the reality in front of her. The girl screams that he wants to absorb everyone's power to become stronger, and that if they don't resist, they will all be annihilated by him. The young man explains that the power of the Celestial Tao comes from all living beings, so the death of everyone would also weaken him. He asks why the Tao would destroy everyone instead of just the strong, and the goddess is shocked by his logic. At this, the elf panics and shouts with her hands on her head that she doesn't know anything. The young man says that even if she doesn't know everything, she will surely recognize this, and then he creates a sphere of blue energy. The blonde girl is completely surprised to see the energy he conjured in front of her. In the reflection of her eyes, a skeleton appears, and she asks what that is. He holds her from behind and shows her a glowing skeleton, asking if she has noticed yet. The young man reveals that the skeleton is her from the second cycle, when she completely drained the source of aura for herself. He explains that the purpose of the source was to revive the world tree and give it vitality. With a serious look, he asks if she knows that it was the continent's source of life. Then he asks how many lives could have been born if she hadn't taken the source, and how many sources exist in her little world. Upon hearing the truth, the goddess can't bear the weight and falls to her knees on the ground, devastated. Crying on her knees, the elf admits that she knew all of this the whole time, but she screams in desperation that she just wanted to live, and if he hadn't destroyed everything, she wouldn't have needed the source to come back.